Ukraine's classic tactic trading space for time has been deployed. Putin is losing men by the thousands to gain inches. They're hitting the Kremlin where it hurts, in their wallet. Any military commander knows it's the logistics that either win or lose the battle. Putin's safe, rare areas are a thing of the past. As Putin's polling plummets to the lowest since the invasion began, and Prince Harry urges America to do more for Ukraine, there are critical updates from the front lines. I'm Philip Ingram, and this is Battle Plans Exposed. Magyar, the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, has given a stark briefing. For the fourth month running, Russia's mobilisation has failed. They're only hitting 60 to 75% of the targets. And thanks to Ukraine's drone technology and Russia's incessant meat wave tactics, the balance is negative. They're losing men faster than they can recruit them. On Ukraine's border, there's a devastating development for Putin. Moldova has snuffed out the threat from Russia in a major strategic shift. In Africa, the Russian army is facing defeat. Jihadists and rebels have seized towns and military bases in Mali, killing the defense minister and forcing the Kremlin-run Africa Corps to withdraw. Elsewhere, indicators show Ukraine's deep strike strategy is going to the next level. Sustained attacks are hitting targets 2,000 kilometers inside Russia. And we'll analyse all of this and more. But first, let's take a look at what's been happening on the front lines. We've seen all the technology of innovation in drones and robotics used for killing in Ukraine. But the other side of that coin is that they can be used to save lives. Now, the drones, unmanned ground drones, can be used to evacuate casualties from the front line. But here in the Lyman sector, a drone pilot spotted a 77-year-old woman walking through a landscape of craters and bodies. Traditional rescue was impossible under heavy shelling. So they sent in the Cerberus, a ground robot with a simple note on it, "Grandma, get on." She trusted the machine. She climbed aboard and was carried to safety in a 4-hour mission. Now, the operators were following her with their aircraft drones and they checked to see that she had got her legs off the ground and weren't going to get trapped before they then moved off with this unmanned ground vehicle. A new item we're going to see more of on the front line. As the front lines become too dangerous for medics, these robots and heavy multicopters are becoming the new lifelines of the Donbass. Now, you've heard us talk about Ukrainian anti-drone drones. This is taking it to the next level. Look up in the sky. This is the 1960s vintage AN-28 transport plane that's been turned into a dedicated drone hunter. Look at the wings. They've been fitted with racks to launch the Ukrainian-made P-1 Sun and Wild Hornet Sting interceptors. This is essentially a cheap air-to-air missile. Instead of using a multi-million-pound Patriot battery to stop a Shahad, Kyiv is now using these low-cost drones to slam them mid-air. This isn't just a test, it's already proven effective in real combat, with some crews reportedly downing over 220 Shahads since February. Launching from an aircraft gives these drones an altitude and a speed they need to hunt down the targets that ground units might miss. Sting interceptors can be launched from the ground, but this can also save precious battery power and boost the flight range. It's also a major step toward zero visibility warfare. By using onboard sensors and cameras, Ukraine is developing the tech to hunt and kill Russian drones in total darkness or heavy cloud. For Putin, the economic maths of his drone campaign is starting to fall apart. But it's not just FPV drones that are having a critical impact in Ukraine. Unmanned systems come in all shapes and sizes, and few are as impressive as the British Windracers ULTRA. This is a heavy lift drone, and it's been in active service on the front line since 2023. We'll have more details on this later on in the episode, but look at the scale of this thing. The role of these heavy drones is about to get even bigger. Defence Secretary John Healey recently announced a landmark £752 million support package for Kyiv. That includes 120,000 British-made drones, with Windracers named as a primary supplier. It's a major shift in modern warfare. And by using these heavy autonomous platforms, Ukraine is keeping its soldiers out of the line of fire whilst ensuring the front line stays supplied and ready to fight. So the Russians aren't just suffering on the front line in Ukraine. Here we have a Russian Mi-8 transport helicopter that was shot down, not in Ukraine, but near the city of Gao in Mali. Expert analysis say that the aircraft was likely brought down by external fire, pointing to a rebel air defense system. All onboard personnel, including the crew and the mobile fire group, were killed. Russia has been trying to secure its footprint in West Africa with its state-controlled Africa Corps, which replaced the Wagner Group last year. This loss occurred during one of the largest coordinated attacks in Mali in recent years. The Azawad Liberation Front rebels and Al-Qaeda-linked fighters launched simultaneous strikes across the country, seizing positions in Gao and Kidal. This latest offensive has seen Russian troops and the Malian army forced into retreat. For Putin, Mali isn't just a badly timed distraction, it's becoming a strategic disaster where he is losing both men and influence. And finally, we've seen drones being parked in the ground, those that are controlled by fiber-optic cables, waiting for a target. Well, the Ukrainians have decided to go out in a bit of a cleanup operation. We've seen drone drops before, but these aren't soldiers this Ukrainian drone is targeting. This is the road to Kostanivka. More on that area soon. But it's littered with Russian booby traps in the form of FPV drones. The Predator Brigade of the National Police is currently clearing the route of what they call Zuduns, traps controlled via fibre optics. Because they use fibre optics, these traps can't be jammed. They sit silently on the road, waiting for a vehicle to pass before they're triggered. It shows just how challenging this battlefield has become. Nowhere is safe, even miles behind the front line. Ukraine is having to hunt down and destroy these individual mines just to keep their supply lines open. But what we're seeing here is an accuracy in the airdrop munitions coming from the Ukrainian drones, hitting the Russian FPV optically controlled drones very accurately indeed. And we're also seeing the high detonation explosions from the grenades that the Ukrainians are dropping. The technology in drone drop weapons has changed dramatically since we first saw it several years ago. Now let's look at the hottest sector on the map. We've got the fortress belt with Kostanivka, which is in the part of the Donetsk Oblast that is still occupied by Ukraine, that Russia wants to get hold of. Lyman, Sloviansk, Krematorsk, Kostanivka, the fortress belt. And Putin is throwing everything he has at it. What we've got here is the area that the Russians have been trying to fight through for the last couple of years. Bakhmut. It took the Russians 18 months to capture Bakhmut. We saw the complete collapse of the Wagner Group and their attempted coup against Moscow after they managed to just capture that. But to move forward again has taken them another couple of years through village and Pokrovsk and other villages, moving tens of meters, a few hundred meters, but at a cost of thousands and thousands of troops. The cost per meter has been huge for the Russians. But the Russians have a goal. They want the whole of the Donetsk region, and the thing that is stopping them across Donetsk is this fortress belt of cities, still occupied by Ukrainian civilians, but the Ukrainians have spent the last couple of years building them up as little fortresses. If we thought Bakhmut and Pokrovsk were difficult for the Russians to capture, these will be virtually impossible. UK Defence Intelligence has assessed that to take the whole of this region would take up to another 4 years and up to another 2 million personnel if the Russians could actually do it. And I personally believe they don't have the wherewithal to be able to concentrate their forces to be able to come in and even threaten each of these cities, never mind capture them. The reason why the Russians want these is that they're the gateway to the rest of Ukraine. Capture this fortress belt, then there's nothing really to stop the Russians from moving forward and up towards Kyiv. So assessing that Russia can't take this militarily, we have to look at the peace plan proposals. Everything that Putin comes out with, or his team comes out with, has always got Ukraine giving up this territory voluntarily. Putin knows he can't take it militarily. He wants diplomatic pressure put on Zelensky to try and give this territory up. And of course, this is part of the industrial heartland of Ukraine. It's part of the mining heartland of Ukraine, not just with coal and steel or iron ore, but also rare earth minerals and other things. Putin wants to be given the cake that he wants to eat. He can't capture it. So in 24 hours, we've seen 25 separate Russian assaults in this sector. But the way they're attacking is changing. Because their massive tank columns are being picked off, the Russians are turning to infiltration missions. So let's take a closer look at these. So inside Kostyantynivka itself, the fighting is defined by high density of drones. The sky is thick with them. Russian special forces tried a trick assault recently using a tank as diversion while the infantry moved along the railway lines. It didn't work. Ukrainian drone pilots and the National Guard spotted them, wiped out the groups and even took prisoners. Now what we're seeing across the whole of the front line is the Russians using these infiltration tactics. They're not using the classic concentrate your force into a group with armoured support and artillery and mortar overwatch, with tanks and armoured infantry working together. They're sending small groups of 2, 4, 6, 10 personnel to try and get as far forward as they can and probe for opportunities to try and exploit further. Or if they can't find opportunities to exploit further, to get as far as they possibly can, to bring a flag out, to take a photograph of it and get that geolocated so that they can try and report back, knowing that a lot of open source intelligence analysts are looking at the photographs that are going up on the Telegram channels or putting out on other channels and geolocating them and saying, aha, we've got confirmed Russian troops in this area. That means they must have captured and advanced further forward. The reality is it's a small group that's gone forward. Most of the time the Ukrainians have killed them, but sometimes not before a photograph has been published. The front lines are not linear anymore. The front lines are dictated by the depth to which the drone units can cover. And this is what's causing confusion as to who is actually advancing, who is actually retreating, and where the front lines have stalled. The Russian military are concentrating more forces on this attack vector coming from the south. This may seem a nightmare scenario for Ukraine. However, it's a clever tactical operation that we're seeing. Here's the staggering fact. Despite the sheer volume of Russian attacks, Ukrainian forces have managed to advance in the Kostyantynivka area. They aren't just holding the line, they're counterattacking and are pushing the Russians back. The focus has been on the settlement of Ivanivske, outside Kostyantynivka, down to the southeast of it, where Ukrainian forces countered the Russian army behind the lines. Ukraine's classic tactic trading space for time has been deployed. We've seen Ukraine losing territory for the Russian forces to advance, only then to be swiftly wiped out by drones. Ukraine is attempting a pincer movement to try and counter the Russians and attack into them, with one coming in from Mykolaiv and the other from Dovobalka, as they try and squeeze the Russians from the side. To the south in the Pokrovsk sector, the pressure is even higher. They're sending in small infantry groups, often on motorcycles, trying to zip through the gaps in Ukrainian lines. We've seen geolocated footage of these motorcycle squads racing along the highway towards Pokrovsk, trying to bypass the heavy guns. It's desperate, high-risk stuff. Ukraine's defense forces have repelled another 25 Russian assaults there in one night. The Russians are attempting to advance on the fly, throwing first-time volunteers into small assault groups without proper training or cohesion. The result is a staggering casualty rate. We're seeing reports that up to 80% of Russia's personnel losses this year are coming from these disorganized small group charges. The front is porous. It's messy and fluid, but the fortress belt is holding firm. Putin is losing men by the thousands to gain inches, while Ukraine's drone-led defense is making every meter a death trap. Let's zoom out and take a look at the breakaway region of Transnistria. Transnistria, to the east of Moldova, butting up against the border with Ukraine, a Russian-occupied region of Moldova. We've covered this unique zone in a previous episode when Ukraine began blockading the region on its border. But let's take a quick recap. For decades, Transnistria has been a frozen conflict, a strip of land held by Russian-backed forces and a 1,000-strong Kremlin hidden army. It's been a constant dagger pointed at Ukraine's flank. But now Moldova's president, Maia Sandu, has just confirmed a significant change in strategy. Her plan is to reintegrate the region into Moldova. This is a major strategic win for the West that's happening right on Ukraine's border. How does it do this? Well, in a diplomatic chess move, the command structure has been declared persona non grata by Moldova. The government in Chisinau has designated the entire command of the Russian forces there as undesirable persons. This includes the commander Dmitry Zelenkov and 5 of his top deputies, including Chief of Staff Marat Yarulin. By branding them undesirable, Moldova has effectively trapped them. If they try to cross into Moldovan-controlled territory, they will be arrested and deported for good. Even their families are now being denied access to Moldovan healthcare and official documents. On top of this, President Sandu says Moldova is now working with the EU to create an international mechanism to reintegrate the region, and notably, they're sidelining Russia entirely. Putin is crying blockade, but the truth is Kyiv has simply locked the back door. Ukraine has heavily mined the border and closed the checkpoints to stop Russian saboteurs, and the economic squeeze is getting tighter. The region can no longer rely on Russian gas transiting through Ukraine, forcing the locals to look to Europe for survival. Without triggering direct confrontation, the Moldovans have trapped the highest-ranking Russian officials in one place. As expected, the Kremlin is furious. They spent hundreds of millions of pounds trying to subvert Moldova's democracy with cyber attacks and fake news. Like a broken record, they're threatening intervention, claiming the 220,000 Russian citizens in the region are under a blockade. It's the same tired script Putin used before he invaded the Donbass. But here's the difference. Russia's hands are tied. With the bulk of the Russian army stuck in the Ukrainian mud, Moscow's ability to protect its peripheral interests is collapsing. Ukraine has effectively cut off the Russian garrison in Transnistria from any easy rotation or resupply. President Sandu was clear. Ukraine is defending Moldova by keeping the Russian army far from their borders. By moving to kick out Russian peacekeepers and integrate with Europe, Moldova isn't just picking a side, they're closing a backdoor that Putin has used to destabilize Eastern Europe for 30 years. It's a quiet revolution, but for the Kremlin, it's a total strategic disaster. And speaking of disasters, it's worth mentioning another worrying signal for Putin. I mentioned earlier that the Russian army is facing defeat in Mali. For years, the Kremlin used the Wagner group to prop up the military junta there, but Wagner has quit. They've rebranded as the Afrika Korps and they're losing. On April the 25th, a massive rebel offensive was launched across the country. Tuareg rebels from the Azawad Liberation Front, the FLA, have recaptured the key northern city of Kidal. The Russians and the Malian army didn't just retreat, they were forced out. Before they left, the Afrika Korps set fire to their own military camp in Kidal to stop it falling into rebel hands. A convoy of Russian troops was seen fleeing towards Gao under a rebel escort. At the same time, jihadist groups have launched coordinated attacks in the south, even hitting targets near the capital, Bamako. The strategy here has backfired. Moscow moved to a more hands-off approach with the Afrika Korps, keeping their men close to bases and relying on drones. But it left the Malian army isolated and vulnerable. Putin's attempt to project power in West Africa is hitting a wall. He's losing influence, he's losing men, and he's losing control of the very minerals he's trying to exploit. For the Kremlin, Mali isn't just a bad headache, it's becoming a multi-layered catastrophe. I mentioned Ukraine's deep strike strategy is hitting a new gear. The latest intelligence from the Institute for the Study of War proves it. Kyiv is exploiting overstretched Russian air defences to hammer Putin's oil industry and military assets. They're hitting the Kremlin where it hurts, in their wallet. Over 48 hours, Ukrainian forces have struck the Yaroslav refinery just northeast of Moscow. This is a massive facility processing 15 million tonnes of oil a year, churning out the gasoline and diesel that fuels the Russian war machine. Footage shows the site in flames. A key unit for raw material processing was likely taken out. And it's not an isolated hit. In the last 2 weeks alone, Ukraine has launched at least 10 strikes against Russian oil and gas infrastructure. On Russia's Black Sea coast, Ukraine has just pulled off a hat trick on one of Russia's most vital oil hubs, Tuapse, just to the south of Novorossiysk. On the night of the 27th of April, a third wave of drones slammed into the refinery on the Black Sea coast. This isn't just a nuisance. The refinery was already reeling from strikes on April the 16th and April the 20th. The damage is total. Intelligence confirms that 24 storage tanks have been destroyed. That's over half the entire facility. The fires from the previous attacks hadn't even been put out before the new drones arrived. Now the city is literally covered in a black rain, a toxic mix of oil and soot falling from the sky. The impact is massive. The refinery has shut down indefinitely and traffic at the port has been cut in half. This isn't just about fuel for Putin's tanks. It's about the billions of pounds in exports he uses to pay for his war. Kyiv's message is clear. If you fund the invasion with oil, your oil is no longer safe. But of course, it's not just oil. Kyiv is clearing the skies and the seas in occupied Crimea. A massive drone campaign, at least 71 drones in one night, targeted the naval base and airfield at Sevastopol. The damage is significant. 2 large landing ships, the Yamal and the Flitschenkopf, were hit. This isn't just about sinking ships, it's about blinding the Kremlin by taking out the radar and intelligence hubs. A reconnaissance ship, a radio intelligence headquarters, and a MiG-31 interceptor aircraft were all struck. Putin's Black Sea fleet is being picked apart once again, piece by piece. Kyiv is effectively turning Crimea from a Russian fortress into a death trap for the Tsar's navy. The reach of these attacks proves no part of the peninsula is beyond Ukraine's grip, and the reach of these attacks is rewriting the map. We've seen the strikes hit as far north as Chelyabinsk, and further north from that, Yekaterinburg, and that's 1,800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. I might need a bigger map for the studio soon, because Kyiv is now striking deep past the Ural Mountains. Ukraine is now reaching over this mountain range that stretches from north to south. The Ural Mountains were always something that we talked about during the Cold War. It is the line that defines what is, to the west of it, European Russia, and to the east of it, Asian Russia. But Russia concentrated much of its more classified defense projects to the east of the Ural Mountains, thinking that it was outside any threat from Western aircraft and Western missile systems. But no longer. Ukraine is proving that wrong. This isn't random. They're using homegrown drones to hunt for gaps in Russia's deep rear. In Yekaterinburg, Russia's 4th largest city, a drone hit a central high-rise after being diverted by local electronic warfare. And just across the region, in Chelyabinsk, explosions were reported at the metallurgical plant, one of the biggest steelmakers in Russia. Also bear in mind, these drones don't just fly in a straight line. To reach these targets, they have to navigate a maze. They zigzag their way through Russia. They don't fly as the crow flies. They use complex multi-point flight paths to slip through air corridors that bypass Russian radar and air defences. This shows the sheer sophistication of Ukraine's new unmanned systems forces. They aren't just building drones, they're building a layered command structure that can coordinate thousands of missions a day, and the production line is moving. Ukraine has just signed a landmark deal to build several thousand mid-strike drones in Norway. These are designed specifically to hit targets between 50 and 200 kilometres behind the lines, filling the gap between FPVs and long-range missiles. Norway is funding this with an extra £1.5 billion, allowing Ukraine to build its proven tech in safe conditions on Norwegian soil. The first of these drones will hit the front lines by this summer. As Russia's air defences are pulled thinner and thinner to protect these distant factories, expect these strikes to become more frequent and even more destructive. Putin's safe rear areas are a thing of the past. And finally, drones are no longer just toys or high-tech gadgets. They're the new bullets of this war. Experts estimate they now cause 3/4 of all casualties on the battlefield. Ukraine plans to build up to 10 million of them this year alone, treating them as inexpensive and expendable. Let's take a look at the systems changing the face of combat. We saw the Windracer in action earlier, and its value is in logistics. These are the unseen winners of the war. They solved the last mile delivery problem where Russian artillery makes road travel impossible. The British-made heavy lifter can carry a payload of more than 150 kilograms. It can stay in the air for 10 hours and has a massive 2,000 kilometers range, enough to fly from London to Kyiv and back again. While smaller drones do the fighting, the Windracers are the workhorses. They fly autonomous logistics missions carrying fuel and spare parts and critical supplies to remote forward positions that are too dangerous for traditional lorries. And remember, John Healey's package of 120,000 drones, which includes these. It's a staggering number that shows the UK's commitment to swarming the battlefield with both small and large autonomous systems. When military personnel talk about military capability, we often start to talk about tanks and armoured fighting vehicles and artillery and missiles and guns. But any military commander knows that it's the logistics that either win or lose the battle. These are a game changer. Next up is the Queen Hornet, a multi-role 17-inch heavy hitter that's turned the Russian army's elite tanks into expensive scrap metal. Its primary benefit is filling the gap between small, cheap kamikaze drones and the massive, expensive Baba Yaga bombers. A single Queen Hornet costs about £1,000. Compare that to a Russian T-90M tank, which costs nearly £4 million. But it can carry a payload of nearly 10 kilograms over 5 kilometers. For the price of one tank, Ukraine can build 3,200 of these drones. Unlike one-way kamikaze drones, it is designed for 10 to 30 sorties. This makes it much more cost-effective over its lifespan. It has a top speed of 99 miles per hour, a range of 12 miles, and can fly for up to 25 minutes, carrying a payload of nearly 10 kilograms over 5 kilometers. This allows it to drop significant munitions like the large PG-7V anti-tank rounds rather than just small grenades. A Queen can act as a mothership. It can be a bomber, a remote mine layer, a logistics transport carrying food and medical supplies, or a comms relay. Hauling smaller FPV drones closer to the target, this extends the strike range of smaller drones by 70 to 80%. It has been successfully tested with recoil compensating weapons such as the Bullspike AP or the RPG-75 grenade launcher, allowing it to fire from a distance rather than just dropping bombs. It is the ultimate asymmetric weapon, cheap, expendable, and capable of wiping out a multi-million-pound target with one hit. Finally, we've seen the Wild Hornet's Sting interceptor drone physically knock Russian drones out of the sky. But Ukraine has another club in its golf club of drones. This is the anti-aircraft FPV drone, an alternative to the kinetic Sting. Details are understandably murky on this drone, but as we can see in this footage of it, it hunts down enemy drones and engages them kinetically. Flying up to 5 kilometers in the sky, it reaches speeds of 87 miles per hour to hunt Russian drones. With a warhead weighing about half a kilogram, it's enough to take out most enemy drones. A key feature of the Sting and other Wild Hornet variants is its increasing use of AI-assisted terminal guidance. Once the pilot identifies the target, like a Shahad or reconnaissance drone, and locks on, an onboard chip takes over. If the connection to the pilot is jammed, in the final seconds, the drone uses its own computer vision to complete the intercept autonomously. So that's all for this week's Battle Plans Exposed. If you like what you've seen, please share it with your friends. If you've got any comments, put them in the comments line below. But of course, please hit like, and thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.